Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishaka Nibitamsha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Tinamini Shivarsavanavi Devi Dayitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vigyana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhur Ujvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktita Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namastute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasidanta Dvantaharine Namo Gora Kishwaraya Sakshat Vairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambode Padambu Jayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachitanandanamine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gora Virbhava Bhumestvam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Savabhuma Sri Jagannatayate Namaha Vanshakalpatarabhyascha Kripa Sundubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Amne Gurachase Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhaktasaktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Suratam Bhargor Mama Mandavatir Kati Matsarva Swapadam Bojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadrumadaha Shrimad Ratnagara Simhasanastito Shrimad Radha Sila Govinda Devo Prastadi Bihi Sevyamanam Smarami Shriman Rasarasaram Bivam Sivata Tatastita Karsan Venuswaner Gopir Gopinatak Striyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinoda Jai Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Guru Pranama Prayers Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Hari Bol. So today we're going to have again a different class, and it's called Appreciating Srila Prabhupada's Purports. And so we want to analyze this one lecture, Srimad Bhagvatam, 1st Canto, 2nd Chapter, 21st verse. The lecture he gave on it in Vrindavan, November 1st, 1972. November 1st, 1972. And this is a lecture on the verse 1 to 21. And what is that verse? Vidyate hridaya grantis chidyante sarva samsaya shiyante chasikaramani just evat manishware. So, thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of samsayam samagam, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth, personality of Godhead. Okay, so that's one translation, but there's an alternate translation to that verse, and it says, thus the knots of the heart and all misgivings are cut to pieces. The chain of fruit of action, karma, is terminated when one sees the self as master. So that sounds a lot different than the original than what I just read. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection. Well, that's in here also. It says, thus the knots of the heart and all misgivings are cut to pieces. Okay, so that's bidyate means cutting or slicing. Hridaya grantis, that's the hard knot of material affection or sex life, as we're going to hear in the lecture. But then it says, Shiyantecha Shikarmani, Drista Evat Manishware. So what does that mean? Well, we have to go to the original verse. And the original verse, the translation of Srimad Bhagvatam, is the same as what I just read. Thus the knots of the heart and all misgivings are cut to pieces. The chain of fruitive actions, karma, is terminated when one sees the self as master. Okay, so in the alternate translation, in this alternate translation, it says, the chain of fruitive activities or actions, karma, is terminated. That's Siyante Chasya Karmani. And then it says, the chain of fruitive actions, karma, is terminated when one sees the self as master. Whereas in the other translation it says, thus the hard knot of material affection thus Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram. That text, that those two words, a samsayam samagram, is from the previous verse, Shinvata. It's verse number 20, where it says, one second, let's see where that is. Yeah, so we're lecturing today on 1.2.21, but 1.2.20 says, Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana Mukta Sangasya Jayate. Where does that say? Chain of fruit of exit terminated when one sees the self as master. Okay, well, let's just continue. We'll come back to that. Yeah. So Prabhupada, in his lecture, it says, this is complete liberated stage. That's what this verse 1.2.21 is about. The complete liberated stage. In the previous verse, it has been spoken, Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana Mukta Sangasya Jayate. The science of God, or Bhagavat Tattva, the science of the absolute truth, becomes manifest to the liberated soul. We find sometimes that one man is posing to have very much advanced in spiritual understanding or a great devotee. But Mukta Sangha, he is not Mukta Sangha, liberated soul. He cannot give up smoking bidi. In other words, even if one has one bad habit, that's proof that one is not actually completely liberated, even though one may have a lot of knowledge and one may be engaged in devotional service. Prabhupada says, these are the small tests. One who has actually tasted spiritual life, his unwanted things of life would at once diminish. There is no need. Anartha nivritti syat. Anartha, things which are not wanted, which have no meaning. So Mukta Sangha means no material attachment. That is Mukta Sangha. When one is actually liberated, these are the signs. So that's why it says, Vidyate hridaya grantis chidyante sarva samsaya. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram. Okay, now, where is that coming from? The samsayam samagram. That is from, I'll tell you in a minute. Samsayam samagram. Okay, we'll come back to that. Okay, we'll come back to that. So, Now Prabhupada says, Vidyate Hridaya Grantis. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection. Our material life begins by a knot in the heart. K-N-O-T. It means a knot. Not N-O-T. K-N-O-T. What is that knot? That is sex desire. This is the knot. A man hankering after a woman and a woman hankering after a man. This attachment is the beginning of material life. Well, that's why we have originally come to the material world, because we have been attracted by sense gratification. And it's different types of sense gratification. But the main type is illicit activities or sense gratification, according to sex. So this hard knot is something that keeps us birth after birth, because that same desire for sense gratification is there in the animals and the insects and all living entities. So it's very, very hard to break away from it. So it says, this is the Hridaya Granthi. And Prabhupada says, everyone, not only human society, in animal society, in bird society, in beast society, you'll find this sex attachment. This is the Hridaya Granthi, beginning. Therefore, according to Vedic civilization, the first teaching to a student is to give him a lesson how to become a Brahmachari, how not to become attached to sex life. That is called Brahmachari. Tapasa Brahmacharyana. This is the Srimad Bhagvatam 6th canto, 1st chapter, 13th verse. So, let's go back to the first point, and that is the verse itself, in which, in the purport to that verse, it says, attaining scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead means seeing one's own self simultaneously. So that's why, in this alternate translation, which says, the chain of fruitive actions is terminated when one sees the self as master. So the self here has a small s in this alternate translation, because we've explained what is self-realization. It involves several steps. We've discussed this many times. First is understanding the difference between the body, the material body, and its eternal soul. And the material body is part of material nature. So the body is given to us by the calculation of our previous karma, and therefore we get a specific body based on our previous karma. Now, every one of us has previous karma, because we cannot tell when the material creation started or when we fell into the material creation, because material creation is going in a cyclic way, and as soon as one complete cycle is over, 4 ages, then another cycle begins. So we can't tell when we started in the cycle of birth and death. But we can tell the reasons that led to that, and that is called this hard knot of material attraction. Okay, so then it says, as far as the identity, so attaining scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead means seeing one's own self simultaneously. So if we see ourself in relation to material nature, we see that we're not part of it because we have an eternal soul. But our soul is also part and parcel of Krishna. So now we see two things, material nature and our soul, which is different than material nature. And now we see the third thing, our soul is part and parcel of Krishna. And Krishna himself is the source of everything spiritual and everything material. So, therefore, now we see three things: the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and included in that is all the different expansions of the Lord, beginning with Balaram, then the first Chaturvyuha, and then Narayana, then the second Chaturvyuha, then the Vishnu incarnations, and then other incarnations. There are Yuga Avatars, there's Manvantara Avatars, there's Purusha Avatars, there are Shaktavish Avatars, there are also Naimitic and Nitya avatars. So some of them are eternal, and some of them are animal-like or mixed animal-human. And then there's Yuga, there's Manvantara avatars, and there are pastime avatars. Okay, so therefore, these are all parts and parcels of Krishna, and then we come, including demigods and then people in the middle planets and then the demoniac planets, and then the whole material energy. So everything is coming from Krishna. He's the original cause of everything. He's the effect also, and he's the cause and the effect, but yet he's transcendental to everything. So here it says that so realizing all these things is self-realization, ultimately realizing our eternal relationship with Krishna. That's why the S in this alternate translation is a small s, when one sees the self as master. So we are the master of this material body, but we have some limited free will, and we are the master of our soul. And so we made a mistake as master of the soul and became attracted to the material nature, and then we became conditioned by it. And we think that we're master of the body, but actually we're not, because the body is made of material energy, which all belongs to Krishna. So that's a false concept. The only real concept now is that we are the master of the soul, but our mastership is very limited to either following Krishna or rejecting the follow of Krishna. So the materialist does not believe in the existence of the spirit self, and empiric philosophers believe in the impersonal feature of the whole spirit without individuality of living beings. But the transcendentalists affirm that the soul and the supersoul are two different identities, qualitatively one but quantitatively different. So I'm reading now from the purport to 1.2.21. There are many other theories, but all these different speculations are at once cleared off as soon as Sri Krishna is realized in truth by the process of bhakti yoga. So we have to get rid of all these false theories and speculations. And once they're cleared away in our mind, we realize that Krishna is, in truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the only way to understand him is through engaging in bhakti yoga. So we also have to become free of the idea that I am the owner of this body. We're not the owner of the body. Krishna is. Therefore, we should only use the body in the service of Krishna. So these are realizations, part of self-realization that we come through. And then Sri Krishna is like the sun, and the materialistic speculators or speculations about the absolute truth are like the darkest midnight. As soon as Krishna's sun is arisen within one's heart, the darkness of the materialistic speculations about the absolute truth and the living beings is at once cleared off. In the presence of the sun, the darkness cannot stand, and the relative truths that were hidden within the dense darkness of ignorance become clearly manifested by the mercy of Krishna, who is residing in everyone's heart as the supersoul. So here Prabhupada is referred to several verses in the Shastra. Tamasima Jyotirgama, Mrityamra Amraka. So it says, go from the ignorance or darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge. So that is a Vedic aphorismic verse, and we always say it at the end of every ritual activity. And then also, where we have the other verse, Krishna Surya Sama Maya Haya Andakar, Yahan Krishna Tahanahi Mayara Adhikar. Krishna is compared to sunshine, and Maya is compared to darkness. Wherever there is sunshine, there cannot be darkness. As soon as one takes to Krishna consciousness, the darkness of illusion, the influence of the external energy, will immediately vanish. So that's Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, and 22nd chapter and 31st verse. So it's a very famous verse. Krishna Surya Sama Maya Haya Andakara Yahan Krishna Tahanahi Mayara Adhikar. Okay, so therefore this plays into, if we read the purport to that verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 22.31, it says in Srimad Bhagvatam 2.9.34, so this is the second of the 4 nutshell verses of Bhagavatam. Rite ritam yat pratiyeta na pratiyeta chatmani tadvidyat atmano mayam yata baso yata tama. What appears to be truth without me is certainly my illusory energy. For nothing can exist without me. It is like a reflection of real light in the shadows. For in the light there is neither shadow nor reflections. So Prabhupada writes in purport there, he says, wherever there is light, there cannot be darkness. When a living entity becomes Krishna conscious, he is immediately relieved of all material lusty desires. Lusty desires and greed are associated with rajas and tamas, passion and darkness. When one becomes Krishna conscious, the modes of passion and darkness immediately vanish, and then the mode of goodness, sattva guna, remains. When one is situated in the mode of goodness, he can make spiritual advancement and understand things clearly. This position is not possible for everyone. When a person is Krishna conscious, he continuously hears about Krishna. That's exactly the point. That's what we're trying to do, continuously hear about Krishna, thinks about him, worships him, and serves him as a devotee. If he remains in Krishna consciousness in this way, the darkness of Maya certainly will not be able to touch him. Wow, what a wonderful purport by Prabhupada. And therefore that speaks to the purport that we're reading from 1.2.21. So then Prabhupada continues. He says, in the Bhagavad-Gita 10.11, the Lord says, in order to show special favor for his pure devotees, he personally eradicates the dense darkness of all misgivings by switching on the light of pure knowledge within the heart of the devotee. Therefore, because of the personality Godhead taking charge of illuminating the heart of his devotee, certainly a devotee engaged in his service in transcendental love cannot remain in darkness. He comes to know everything of the absolute and relative truths. These are big, big statements. Notice it says, the Lord takes charge of illuminating the heart of his devotee. Certainly a devotee engaged in his service in transcendental love cannot remain in darkness. So, do we, at the present moment, have transcendental love for Krishna? I don't think so. Well, I'll just speak for myself. I don't think I have transcendental love for Krishna, but although I am engaged all the time in the devotional service of the Lord, that transcendental love, well, you have examples of it. You have Vyasadeva, you have Narada Muni, you have Brahma, you have great personalities like Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Gaura Babaji, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Narottam Das Thakur, the 6 Goswamis. There are many examples of devotees, Kunti Devi herself and Draupadi. They all have this transcendental love of the Lord. So, such a person cannot remain in darkness. He comes to know everything of the absolute and the relative truths. Well, That is, Krishna is the absolute truth, and everything else is relative to him, dependent on him. They're not independent. That's what it means when you say something is relative to something else or someone else. They're dependent on that person or that thing. So we are all dependent on the Acharyas, especially Srila Prabhupada, and we are dependent on Krishna, ultimately, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we are only relative in the material world, as long as we're under the conditions of material nature. We're just a relative truth. Once we become transcendentally situated and completely serving Krishna's service, and Krishna with service and love, we don't merge with, but we participate in the absolute truth, which is Krishna, the person, and caring for Krishna, caring for him like the gopis are caring for him. If we come to that position, then we're a cooperator with the Lord rather than independent of the Lord. We're cooperating with the Lord. So we come to know everything of the absolute and relative truths. The devotee cannot remain in darkness, and because a devotee is enlightened by the personality of Godhead, his knowledge is certainly perfect. This is not the case of those who speculate on the absolute truth by dint of their own limited power of approach. Perfect knowledge is called parampara, or deductive knowledge coming down from the authority to the submissive oral receiver, who is bona fide by service and surrender. So these are the two things, service and surrender, that helps us come to the platform of devotional service. And that means that we come to the level of Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, no more hankering and no more lamentation. We continue to a point of being neutral and seeing equality. We are one qualitatively with the Lord, different quantitatively. And neutrality, we see that everything that's happening in the material world has a beginning and end. Therefore, there's no reason to be agitated by it. We should simply remain focused on devotional service. So that is the principle of neutrality. Nothing disturbs us from performing our devotional service. And devotional service is only directed at pleasing Krishna. Okay, so then when we are this deductive knowledge, that means knowledge from the parampara. Why? Because that knowledge is perfect. It's not mundane deductive knowledge. It's transcendental deductive knowledge. So transcendental knowledge means it's infallible. It is akshara. And mundane knowledge is kshara. It's fallible. There's many mistakes in it because it's based on speculation. So, but the transcendental knowledge is above all ignorance. Uttama, above all ignorance. So therefore, that is the knowledge coming down through parampara. And therefore it says, one cannot challenge the authority of the Supreme and know him also at the same time. He reserves the right of not being exposed to such a challenging spirit of an insignificant spark of the whole, a spark subjected to the control of illusory energy. The devotee is submissive, and therefore the transcendental knowledge descends from the personality of Godhead to Brahma, and from Brahma to his sons and disciples in succession. This process is helped by the supersoul within such devotees. That is the perfect way of learning transcendental knowledge. So Krishna is in our heart. He can reveal the knowledge to us, but it depends on our submissiveness and service. Okay, so this is the purport to the verse Vidyate Hridaya Grantis, the one that we're studying today. So we are showing how every statement that Prabhupada makes in his class on this verse is shastrically valid. So in the first paragraph of the class, he mentions anartha nivritti sat. There is no need. Anartha nivritti sat. That comes from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, first canto, 4th chapter, 15th and 16th verses, which says that unwanted material advancement that entangles the jiva in bondage of material body, followed by all sorts of material miseries. So these unwanted material advancement is called anartha nivritti syat, or modern education. Modern education is toxic because it's mostly based on speculation and unfounded theories or imperfect theories, and therefore it says unwanted material advancement that entangles the jiva in bondage of material body, followed by all sorts of material miseries. That's what happens when we advance in material knowledge. We get entangled. So, and then he quotes Mukta Sangha, or he says, so Mukta Sangha means no material attachment. So that is the Iha Yasya Harir Dasya Karmana Manasajira Akilasvapi Avastasu Jivan Mukta Sa Uchyate. Someone's liberated when they use all of their facilities, body, senses, mind, intelligence, everything in the service of Krishna. Then they become Mukta Sangha, or no material attachments. In other words, they're liberated. And then Prabhupada quotes another verse, in the 6th canto, 1st chapter, 13th verse. Tapasa Brahmacharyana. And this is a very important verse because he talks about becoming a brahmachari, that this should start right from the beginning of life. And it says, Tapasa Brahmacharyana samena cha damena cha tyagena satyasochabhyam yamena niyamena va. So this verse says, to concentrate the mind, one must observe a life of celibacy and not fall down. One must undergo the austerity of voluntarily giving up sense enjoyment. One must then control the mind and senses, give charity, be truthful, clean and nonviolent, follow the regulative principles, and regularly chant the holy name of the Lord. Thus, a sober, faithful person who knows the religious principles is temporarily purified. Notice the word temporarily. Purified of all sins performed with his body, words, and mind. These sins are like the dried leaves of creepers beneath a bamboo tree, which may be burned by fire, although their roots remain to grow again at the first opportunity. That means as soon as we bloop, we revert back to what we were before. So therefore it says one should not fall down. Otherwise we'll revert back to what we were before, almost instantaneously. So and it gives the example of a bamboo tree. They're like these sins are like the dried leaves of creepers beneath a bamboo tree, which may be burned by fire, although their roots remain to grow again at the first opportunity. So then Prabhupada writes, Tapa is explained in the Smriti Shastra as follows. Manasas Chandriyanam cha Aikagriyam Paramam Tapasa. This is from the purport to 6.1.13 and 14. It says, complete control of the mind and senses and their complete concentration on one kind of activity is called tapa. Wow, what a wonderful definition. Tapa is not only voluntarily accepting discomfort for spiritual advancement, but it's also means, its more complete definition is complete control of mind and senses and their complete concentration on one kind of activity is called tapa. Our Krishna consciousness movement is teaching people how to concentrate the mind on devotional service. This is first-class tapa, or austerity. Brahmacharya, the life of celibacy, has 8 aspects. 1 should not think of women. 2, one should not speak about sex life. 3, one should not dally, or let's say play games with women. When dally means having a loose relationship, right? Not based on Krishna consciousness. And then it says, number 4, one should not look lustfully at a woman. Number 5, one should not talk intimately with a woman. Or 6, decide to engage in sexual intercourse. 7, nor should one endeavor for sex life. Or 8, engage in sex life. One should not even think of women or look at them, to say nothing of talking with them. So, now, what does this mean exactly? This is the life of a brahmachari. But some brahmacharis decide to get married. So this is not hatred toward women. This is keeping the mind focused on Krishna. So when one gets married, the same principles continue. The husband and wife work together to serve Krishna, and they may have children also, and they take the responsibility of training the children to be Krishna conscious. And as long as they are working cooperatively together and both following the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, they will be tremendously successful. The kids will become devotees. The mother and father are devotees, and they all go back to Godhead. So there's no question of hatred of women. It's a question of not agitating the senses, which includes the mind. So today, there are many, many opportunities for the senses to be agitated. There's movies, there's news, there's books, there's cell phones, there's internet, and there's parties, and there's intoxication, and so many things to agitate the mind and the senses for sense gratification. So, therefore, men and women in Krishna consciousness are trained not to unnecessarily agitate their senses. They don't deny the senses like the Mayavadis may do. They use the senses in the service of Krishna. And that way, they are aloof or transcendental from the agitation of sex life, of trying to make billions of dollars and spending it big houses, big cars, and big stool, etc. So we can be sober and faithful persons and know the religious principles and regularly chant the holy names of the Lord and follow the regulative principles and so forth. But we are temporarily purified of all sins performed with the body, words, and mind when we're doing those things. But if we fall down, then it comes back to us again, that type of loose, sinful life. So we have to be very careful not to fall down. And therefore, even if we do fall down, that can be excused if we continue in devotional service. And therefore there can be accidental fall downs, and one is not condemned for it as long as they continue in devotional service. So that's another verse that is Bhagavad-Gita, and it's a very important verse, 9th chapter, 28th, 27th verse, is it? Let me see. No. 28, 29, okay, 30th verse. Yeah. Even if one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. It's the 30th verse in the 9th chapter. Apichet sudara charobhajanti mam ananyabhak sadur eva samantavya samyak vyavasito hi saha. So that's a very important verse, and therefore it says, this is called first-class brahmacharya. If a brahmacharya sannyasi talks with a woman in a secluded place, naturally there will be a possibility of sex life without anyone's knowledge. Therefore, a complete brahmacharya practices just the opposite. If one is a perfect brahmachari, he can very easily control the mind and senses, give charity, speak truthfully, and so forth. To begin, however, one must control the tongue and the process of eating. So this verse today, which talks about accidental fall downs and forgiveness for them, is very important, because obviously people make mistakes in life, but there is forgiveness. There is a pathway for them. It's not that, oh, you make one mistake, you're finished. It's understood that people will make mistakes, but one should be very, very careful. Therefore, all these precautions for men and women, and what's being said here about men and women is valid both ways. Women also who are striving to be Krishna conscious must avoid, before marriage, the association of men except for their mother and father, and maybe other relatives, as long as those relatives are protective of the child, and so therefore, in our earlier formative years, right up to the point where we may get married, we should be very, very careful about who we associate with. It's absolutely important in order to cultivate Krishna consciousness and not be misled. So 9th chapter, 30th verse is very important. And then it says, in the Bhakti Marga, or the path of devotional service, one must strictly follow the regulative principles by first controlling the tongue. Sevan mukhe hi jiva do swayam eva spuratyada. So there's another verse. Atakshi Krishnanama di nabha grayam indriya. Sevan mukhe hi jiva do swayam eva spuratyada. So these are all, I'm reading from the 6th canto, 1st chapter, 13th and 14th verse. So everything begins with the tongue. But the tongue can be controlled by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and not speak of any subjects other than those concerning Krishna, and not tasting anything not offered to Krishna. If one can control the tongue in this way, brahmacharya and other purifying processes will automatically follow. It will be explained in the next verse that the path of devotional service is completely perfect and therefore superior to the path of fruitive activity and the path of jnana or knowledge. Quoting from the Vedas, Srila Viraraghava Acharya explains that austerity involves observing fasts as fully as possible, tapasan asakena. Srila Rupa Goswami has also advised that atyahara, too much eating, is an impediment to the advancement of spiritual life. Also in Bhagavad-Gita 6:17, Krishna says, Yukta hara viharasya, yukta chetasya karmasya, yukta swapna vabodasya yogo bhavati dukkha. He who is temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. And yoga system means connecting to Krishna. It doesn't mean doing pranayama and so forth. It might also mean that, but yoga, ultimately, the highest goal of yoga is connecting to Krishna and always being engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. Okay, so when a devotee becomes serious about following the rules and regulations, the devotee can become undisturbed under all circumstances. And this is in Bhagavad-Gita 2:14. Matrasparsastu konteya sitosna sukadukadaha agama payano nityas tam statikshas vabharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O Skayana Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. In material life, there are many disturbances, adhyatmika, adidaivika, adibodhika. One who has learned to tolerate these disturbances under all circumstances is called dhira, a sober person. Okay, so we see how Prabhupada's lectures lead to many other verses, and they're supported. Every statement is supported by Shastric evidence. So then Prabhupada says, but today, so he says, tapasya, it requires tapasya. At the present moment, the students are, what to speak of tapasya, they are given all kinds of luxuries. So how there will be brahmacharis? It is not possible, especially in the Western countries. The boys and girls, they're educated in one place, co-education, and they live in the same building. And there are so many things you know better than me. Well, yeah. In Vedic times, boys and girls were educated separately. They came together in the temple. That's okay, because in the temple everything is based on serving the Lord. But there was no casual relationship. Everything was formalized. And usually marriages were, determined before girls or females attained puberty. And the boys were usually like around 16 years old, and the girl was probably like 8 or 10 years old, and they would be married, but they wouldn't live together until the boy became a man and was able to support the wife with some trade or some profession. And when the girl attained, let's say, 15, 16 years old, at that point, they would begin to live together. So it was a nice system because the girl knew who her husband was at an early age, and she was taught to be always submissive and loyal to the husband. It's not that, they marry an 80-year-old man to a 16-year-old girl. That was not the process. But the boy should always be a little bit older than the girl. So that was a nice system because there was none of this, courting and this thing and that thing. It was prearranged by the parents, and they used astrology also in the understanding, and the qualities of the boy, and the girl, and they matched them up, and then they knew that they were married, so they didn't have to start looking around, and then it created a lot of stability, especially since normally it's said that the first person that one has intimate contact with, that person, especially the girl, never forgets it, and the boy also never forgets it. So it's very important that the first contact be between bona fide husband and wife. And so then Prabhupada says, but today there's no brahmacharya, That means the knot in the heart or sex desire is more and more increased. It is not decreased. But if one takes to Krishna consciousness by practice, one comes to the point of giving up all these unwanted things. Okay, sorry, I got to take this phone call. Okay, so the this hard knot of material desire and sense gratification is very difficult to break. But it's possible by Krishna consciousness. It's definitely not possible by modern education and modern theories of morality, so-called morality. And there's a verse that's quoted about that, a very important verse from the fifth canto of Srimad Bhagvatam. It says, Pumsta striya mituni bhavan etan tayor mito hridaya grantim aho griha chetra satapta vitar janasya mohayam aham ameti. And it says the attraction. So Prabhupada quotes that verse in the second, in the third, in the third paragraph of his lecture, and he says, Pumsastriya mituni bhavam, sex desire, mituni bhavam etam, trayar hridaya grantiv. And when they are actually united, that knot becomes more and more tight. But if one takes the Krishna consciousness, then gradually vidyate hridaya grantis, that knot of sex desire is broken. That is the test, or is loosened, or annihilated. That is the test whether one's sex desire has diminished. That is the test of Krishna consciousness. So this verse, Pumsam Striya Maituni Bhavam Etan, is 5th canto, 5th chapter, 8th verse. 5th canto, 5th chapter, 8th verse, and it says, the attraction between male and female is the basic principle of material existence. On the basis of this misconception, which ties together the hearts of the male and female, one becomes attracted to his body, home, property, children, relatives, and wealth. In this way, one increases life's illusions and thinks in terms of I and mine, aham mameti, which is the genesis of the false ego. So, what is this saying exactly? This is actually a very profound statement. The attraction between male and female is the basic principle of material existence. So, is it wrong to be attracted to another person? It depends. What does it depend on? It depends on how you see. Darshan. How do we see things in life? So in Krishna consciousness, we learn to see the soul, the individual soul and the super soul in the material body. That's the way we see. Even if it's only theoretical, still, that's what we look at. That's not the way people see each other in modern life, or even in ancient life. They were learned to they were taught to see the body and not see the soul and not see the Paramatma. So that type of seeing leads to the hard knot of sex desire. But when we see that this is the eternal servant of Krishna, and we see the presence of Krishna in the heart of the man or woman that we're looking at, that's a different way of seeing. That is real seeing. That is real darshan. That is real philosophy. But if we learn to see the body, she has a nice face and wearing nice clothes and nice shape, or he's handsome and he has muscles and he's tall and dark and handsome and blah, blah, blah. That type of seeing leads to sense gratification. But when we see the soul and its eternal relationship to Krishna and not the body, because the body, the beauty is only skin deep. You make a little cut and blood comes out. And you make a bigger cut and guts will come out. So it's a bag, and it's a nice decorated bag, but on the inside there's basically stool. So therefore we have to be able to analyze what we're looking at. And we're looking at, 5 senses and the mind and intelligence and the false ego and the five objects of the senses and the five working senses and also the five great elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether. And then the Mahatattva. That's the body, but what we need to see is the soul in the body, the 25th element, and then the super soul, the 26th element. That's real seeing. And when we become, and then we see that Krishna is always witnessing everything we do. And he's in my heart. He's in the heart of the person we're seeing. So there's always that witness factor. And when we begin to see like that, then we become civilized and we become very careful about what we do. That should be taught, that to learn how to see. So it says the attraction between male and female is the basic principle of material existence. On the basis of this misconception, which ties together the hearts of male and female, one becomes attracted to his body, home, property, children, relatives, and wealth. In this way, one increases life's illusions and thinks in terms of I and mind. And in the purport to this verse, this is 5th canto, 5th chapter, 8th verse, Prabhupada says, sex serves as the natural attraction between man and woman, and when they are married, their relationship becomes more involved. Due to the entangling relationship between man and woman, there is a sense of illusion whereby one thinks, this man is my husband, or this woman is my wife. This is called Hridaya Granthi, the hard knot in the heart. This knot is very difficult to undo, even though a man and woman separate either for the principles of Varnashram or simply to get a divorce. In any case, the man always thinks of the woman and the woman always thinks of the man. Thus, a person becomes materially attached to family, property, and children, although all of these are temporary. The possessor unfortunately identifies with his property and wealth. Sometimes, even after renunciation, one becomes attached to a temple or to the few things that constitute the property of a sannyasi, but such attachment is not as strong as family attachment. The attachment to the family is the strongest illusion. In the Satya Samhita, it is said, Brahmadya yajna valkadya muchyante stri sahayana bodhyante kechan aite sam vishesham cha vido vidu. Sometimes it is found among exalted personalities like Lord Brahma that the wife and children are not a cause of bondage. On the contrary, the wife actually helps further spiritual life and liberation. Nonetheless, most people are bound up by the knots of the marital relationship, and consequently they forget their relationship with Krishna. So, it is possible that a man and woman can live together as husband and wife and both be Krishna conscious and both practice Krishna consciousness and transfer it to their children, and right up to the moment of death, both are engaged in the service of the Lord with pure hearts and without material attachments, because they used everything material they had in the service of Krishna, or they dovetailed them. And they also went through the 4 stages of life. There's Brahmachari or Brahmacharini, there's Grihastha, there's Vanaprastha, and there's Sannyas. So the wife and husband, if they separate, so the wife takes sannyas. The wife lives like a sannyasi also. She's not traveling around all the time like the sannyasi, but she is living the same type of life of renunciation and complete immersion in transcendental devotional service. Okay, so now continuing in Prabhupada's purport to 1.2.21, November 1st, 1972. That is the test, whether one's sex desire has diminished. That is the test. Vidyate hridaya grantis, chidyante sarva samsaya. Samsaya. We are now in hazy conclusion. What is our position? We do not know. We do not know what is God. what I am? What is our relationship? Everyone is speculating. Therefore, there are so many parties, the Jnani party, the Yogi party, the Karmic party, generally. And within each and every party, there are hundreds and thousands of parties. So when one becomes free from the knot, or the knot is cut off, the attachment for material desires is cut off, at that time, he can understand what is his position, what is his real position. So this being in a what's called hazy conclusion. We are now in hazy conclusion. What does that mean? That means when we enter into the material world, we become, we develop this hazy conclusions about life. We don't know what is the real purpose of life, and we basically vacillate towards sense gratification. And all throughout our life, we don't really have a clear-cut understanding what is the purpose of life, and what is my relationship with the material nature, what is my relationship with other people, what is my relationship with Krishna and Guru and so forth. All these things remain very hazy and unresolved, and therefore people are confused about life. And there's the Jnani party, the Yogi party, the Karmi party. Karmi party is all about doing rituals for sense gratification, or not even doing rituals, just sense gratification. And the Jnani party is developing knowledge to attain the Brahmajyoti, impersonal realization. And Yogi party is developing all kinds of mystic powers, or becoming, let's say, exceptional and trying to emulate God. Or yoga is connecting to God, but they want to connect through mystical powers, and then they get enamored by those mystical powers and never really become purified. So there are different parties, and inside each party there are hundreds and thousands of other parties, offshoots. And this, I'll give an example of that tomorrow. There's so many examples of that, how there's so many offshoots in Islam, there's so many offshoots in Christianity, so many offshoots in Hinduism, there's so many offshoots in businesses and philosophies. There's so many offshoots in philosophy and religion. So under these major categories, there's hundreds, Prabhupada says, and hundreds and thousands of parties, sub-parties. So when one actually becomes free from the knot, or the knot is cut off, the attachment for material desires is cut off, at that time he can understand what is his position, what is his actual position. Therefore, two things must go on in parallel lines. On one side, a person should cultivate Krishna consciousness, and another side, he should try to give up all unwanted things. That will help him. You cannot continue both the things. So that's the Bible has a very interesting saying. You cannot serve God and Mammon at the same time. In other words, you cannot be striving to serve God and at the same time serving your whims for sense gratification. It won't work. You'll be conditioned by the sense gratification, and you will never really engage in devotional service. So there are many people like that in life. Most people are like that. They say, "Oh, Gurudev, I love you, and I want to serve you, and I'm going to." But then they get so caught up in material life, they don't really do any service. Although they're claiming, I love you, and I'm completely surrendered, and you're the only way, but they're not really into it because they're distracted by desire for sense gratification. Therefore, it says there are two things must go on in parallel lines. One side, a person should cultivate Krishna consciousness, and another side, one should try to give up all unwanted things, all the anarthas. That will help him. You cannot continue both the things. Just like when a person is diseased, he's given medicine. At the same time, he has to act. not to take this, not to take that. In other words, he has to act. He's given medicine, he's given a diet. So, therefore, he cannot. So the diet says, don't eat this, don't eat that, only eat this thing. Don't go to sleep early, wake up early, don't stay up late, don't wake up late, so forth. So then Prabhupada says, that is the way of treatment. Not that whatever you like, you can eat. Whatever you like, you can do. At the same time, you become spiritually advanced. This is all nonsense. Tapasa Brahmacharyana, Srimad Bhagvatam 6.1.13. One has to practice tapasya. Tapas. Tapas means a little inconvenience, voluntarily accepting inconvenience. Just like brahmachari lies down on the floor. A sannyasi also. They follow the same practice as far as possible. Taking bath 3 or thrice daily. And so many rules and regulations are there. But at the present age, it is not possible to follow all the rules and regulations, but at least everyone who is interested in advancing Krishna consciousness must rise early in the morning, before 4 a.m., and take his bath and become cleansed, perform Mangal Arti and study. These are tapasya. Tapasya brahmacharyena samena cha damena cha tyagena. Srimad Bhagavatam 6.1.13. Tyagena means renouncement. I like something, but voluntarily I should give it up. That is called tyaga. Of course, one who takes the Krishna consciousness seriously, Krishna helps him to become qualified in these matters. So vidyate hridaya grantis chidyante sarva samsaya. Thus, the hard knot of material affection is cut by knowledge and practice of Krishna consciousness. Okay, so what time is it? Almost 9. Wow. So did they do Arti? No, not yet. Wow. Okay, are there any questions? So we are reading the class Prabhupada gave on November 1st, 1972 in Vrindavan on the first canto, second chapter, 21st verse. We're going paragraph by paragraph and pointing out the verses that Prabhupada uses as Vedic evidence. And so far we covered what? We covered the verse 1.2.21 and also the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.4.15, which is also quoted in the fourth chapter. What is it? Fourth chapter in the purport, the fourth chapter, 10th verse. So you can see the same verse. 1 second. Yeah, fourth chapter, 10th verse. Ado shraddha tata sadhu sangha ta bhajana kriya tato narta nivriti syat. So he quoted anarta nivriti syat. And also the sixth canto, first chapter, 13th verse was quoted. And also the verse Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, 22nd chapter, 31st verse. And also the verse about brahmacharya. Well, that is then the verse about brahmacharya, which is which verse? Also the fifth canto, fifth chapter, 8th verse. And then the verse about brahmacharya was, 1 second. Oh, that's 6:1:13. I'm sorry. Okay. So, and then we also mentioned the verse, 9th chapter, 30th verse. So that's what we discussed today. Oh, okay. And then, I'm sorry, he also quoted the 10th chapter, Bhagavad-Gita 10.11. Yeah. Okay. So 10:11 is a very important verse. It's one of the four nutshells verses. And it says, one second, let me find it. Te samivana kampartamaham agyanamam tama nasyami apabhavasto gyanadipena basvato. So it's a very important verse because one of the nutshell verses. To show them special mercy, Krishna says, I dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. And I also go to the tapasima jyotirgama, go from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, which is a Vedic verse. Okay, are there any questions? So we'll go through this whole lecture and find out all the verses that Prabhupada uses to substantiate what he says or to validate what he says. No questions? Is anybody listening?
Yeah, I got 7 on YouTube.
Okay. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We'll continue tomorrow. We're basically seeing how Prabhupada substantiates or validates everything he says by Shastric evidence. And that's the way to preach. Haribol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.